everybody, welcome to episode 31 of the Hey Kerwin show. We're now in the dirty 30s. We are one step into the dirty 30s, and Matthias is back. Matthias has been on holidays. I'm pretty sure you've been on like fucking holidays for most of this year.
The entire year.
Yeah, like no more holidays for you. You're not allowed to have any more holidays.
And the first question of this one is from Joanna Miller. How do you accept others' poor decisions even when you've tried to enlighten them?
How do you accept others' poor decisions even when you have tried to enlighten them? Well, thank you, Buddha. Well, first and foremost, what other choice do you have? Like, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is the resistance to acceptance. You know, because the only reason that we have pain, the only reason we have, in most cases, mental anguish is when we resist the now, when we resist the reality of what's going on. And then when we become resentful because, well, I told you so, which is an absolute recipe for relationship disaster, whether it be on an intimate relationship, you know, or even just a friendship, or even in a work relationship for the most part. You know, I think the most important, you know, if we look at fundamentally what most people are looking for, is they're looking to be accepted for who they are, you know, for their warts and all, and even for their bad decisions. You know, sometimes we need to understand that people need to make bad decisions in order to create their own lessons. Not everybody wants to be led, you know, not everybody wants to have their hand held, not everyone wants to be shown the right way to do things. And in many cases, I relate to being one of those people. Like I'm much better now, you know, with maturity 43 years later, at being given advice and following that advice. But for the first 20, 25 years of my life, I don't think I listened to anybody. But I also believe the reason I am where I am right now is because for the first 25 years of my life, I didn't listen to anybody. And now, as a result of all these enormous mistakes that I made, I created incredible life lessons, you know, skills, knowledge, experience, and life lessons that fundamentally have led me to where I am today. Now, does that mean that every person who doesn't follow your advice, who makes a bad decision, who makes a mistake is going to learn the lessons that's required? No, it's not. But, you know, it's not up to you to enlighten anyone, you know, and that in itself, and I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way, but that in itself is a little bit egotistical and arrogant in its own right. You know, enlightenment is something that comes from within. Enlightenment is not something that comes from without. And by sitting there and viewing your ability to, you know, enlighten others, you know, either through conversation or through, you know, or through direction or advice, you know, I would say start looking at you, because you might be the problem in this relationship, not necessarily them. And I'm not saying that is the situation or that is the case, because can advice enlighten us? You know, helping people make the right decisions enlighten them? Yes, but not because you give someone advice, because, you know, if you give someone some information and they happen to process it internally in a very specific way, that might switch the lights on in a way where they become, you know, perhaps slightly more enlightened. But we don't enlighten anyone. No one is enlightened by another. The only enlightenment that we create comes from within as a result of the relationships that we create from the outside world and our inside world. And, you know, you might be a part of that, but to take responsibility or even to try and own someone's enlightenment, come on, man, that's just not the cool way to do it. So first and foremost, if you're so enlightened that you're wanting to share your enlightenment, demonstrate what enlightenment looks like. Because to me, you know, an enlightened being is someone who doesn't judge. An enlightened being is someone that doesn't try and force others to do, you know, the things that they may perhaps don't want to do. An enlightened being is someone who allows others their own experience and doesn't judge them for not listening to yours. So my advice is focus on you, bro. You do you, boo. You do you.
Next question comes from, this is probably the longest Instagram handle I've ever seen.
Okay.
För mer sontagener wush.
Wow, I'm not even going to try and...
How do you deal with shyness? With strangers, I'm extremely closed off and need weeks before I feel comfortable.
I can totally relate. And this is the strange thing, and you've probably seen aspects of it, but a lot of people don't really understand that I am actually I can be painfully shy. Like if I'm in an environment, if I'm in a situation, if I'm in a circumstance where I don't know a lot of people, oh my God, I am like Captain Introvert, and I literally just want to go and hide behind a pot plant. But the way that I deal with my shyness is, first things first, I recognize my shyness for what it is, which is on some levels, it's a level of introversion. On some level, it's, you know, this level of fear of how I'm going to be perceived by others. But on the other side of the equation, it's also an opportunity for growth. Like for me, whenever I'm feeling shy or whenever I'm feeling the desire to be introvert, I see that on some levels in certain situations, depending on my energy, as a challenge now. Whereas before, when I felt shy or before when I felt introverted, my first response was to run, to hide, to find a pot plant and just blend in. Whereas now I've literally, rewired my brain. And again, a lot of this comes down to energy, because if I'm feeling tired, man, and I'm feeling shy, the last thing I'm going to do is push myself out of my boundary. But what I've done now, the same with most forms of fear or most forms of pain or most forms of discomfort. Like when I feel fear, pain or discomfort, 9 out of 10 times I've programmed my brain to advance, to go into the discomfort, to go into the fear, to go into the pain, because I understand that's where the growth is. And to me, being shy or being introverted, it's exactly the same thing. It's just a context driven that is in most situations, of a social nature. So, to me, being shy is social discomfort. It's social pain, it's social fear. And it's just learning to respond differently when that stimulus presents itself, and realizing that when we feel social discomfort, when we feel social fear, when we feel social pain, there's a number of responses that we can take, but there's two fundamentals. We can move away, or we can move towards. If we move away, we reinforce those patterns, we reinforce those habits, and we reinforce that relationship between the stimulus and the response, meaning it's bad. Or the second thing we can do is we can move towards, and we can actually engage in what we'd refer to as exposure therapy, where we actually expose ourselves to the high levels of the pain, the high levels of fear, the high levels of shyness or introversion, to a level where after a while the pain starts to diminish, the pain starts to subside, and it becomes more of a natural process whereby this social interaction doesn't necessarily have to be a painful one. Do this 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, in a day. It starts to feel a little bit more like there's a level of flow and there's a level of ease to it. But my advice, you can either use it as a warning to run away, or you can use it as an opportunity or a challenge to step into and grow. And what you do with it, it's not my choice. I'm not going to enlighten you. That's something that you've got to choose to do on your own bat. And so, take that for what it is and do what it is that you want. Yeah.
Amanda 1642.
Amanda 1642. Wow, she's old.
When everyone
I wonder if she's like the very first Amanda that was ever known. You know that joke? Like you ring up somebody and you say, "Is Amanda there?" Amanda who? Amanda Hug and Kiss? Is there Amanda Hug and Kiss in the room? Watch The Simpsons. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Yeah.
When everyone underestimates your capabilities, where do you find the strength to push through challenges?
Internally. Like this is some interesting threads going on here. Like where I find 99% of my strength doesn't come from the outside world. Actually, no, I'd say 90% of my strength comes from inside, and the 10% that comes from the outside, 99.99% of that comes from a little individual called Noah, which is my son. Oftentimes when it comes to requiring strength to do things that we don't have, it's a mental game. It's being able to create the relationship between, what it is that you need to do and what it is that is required from you in order to do it. And all that comes down to is the self-talk in our head. So for me, strength is not something, look, if you're looking on the outside world for strength, then your world will be fundamentally governed by whether or not the thing or the person or the situation or the circumstance is present in order for you to be strong, which means you are completely powerless. An empowered person, an empowered perspective is one where the strength is generated from within. It comes from a psychology, it comes from a perspective, it comes from a relationship with self, whereby you understand that an empowered person, the power lies within. The power lies within here, and the relationships between what it is that we want and the meanings we create. Because if we look at a situation and a thing that we want, and we require strength. In most cases, we require strength because we look at this thing, we might perhaps feel disempowered, but what we perhaps don't do is explore, well, why do I feel disempowered? What is the talk track that is going on upstairs? What are the suggestions that I'm giving to myself right now? What is the relationship between what this is and what this means and my reaction and my response to it? The way that we become empowered is by becoming conscious, is by becoming self-aware of our relationship between self and the stimulus, between self and the thing that we want, but then becoming aware of the dialogue that's going on on inside, because the dialogue that's going on inside here, this is suggestion, this is self-suggestion, it's, it's auto-suggestion, it's self-hypnosis, and whatever we say to ourselves on a repeated basis internally becomes expressed externally in some form of a physical behavior. And if you're not physically behaving in the situations that require strength in the way that you want, then it would be fair to say that there's a level of conditioning psychologically that's required at a thought level to suggest over and 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 over times infinity plus one to get to the point where the psychology builds strength, because a strong mind builds a strong body, and a strong body doesn't just necessarily happen. It happens as a result of a level of discipline and structure and order that's happening upstairs. So for me, my advice to you, if I was talking to myself right now, is find the strength from within. Stop looking for strength from without. Although I get strength from my son, like we're talking like a 10% factor here, because there are certain situations where I feel mentally not like, there's been situations before I'm training and I'm doing a max rep set and I'm feeling like, oh my God, I don't know if I've got the kit to do this. And I literally think to myself, what would Noah want me to do? And if Noah was here right now, what would be the example that I'd want to set for him? And so when that happens, boom, baby, I click into fucking overdrive and I smash out what it is that I need to do. But that's my 10%. If it was the other way around, if it was, I needed, to tap into his perspective or to his presence 90% of the time, and I only had my own internal 10%, I would be governed by my ability to be around him or to think about him. And for me, that's just disempowering. Like, empowerment comes from within. Choose your own thoughts, become conscious, deliberately hand select and choose or define the suggestions and the thoughts that you want. Understand that the thoughts that become things, so choose the thoughts that you want to manufacture the external response that you're looking for based on an internal dialogue that is deliberate, not desperate. Because most people, the dialogue that's going on up here, it's not something that they've hand selected, it was something that was given to them by someone in their life at some previous point. So don't take the scraps of the thoughts that were given to you. Define, choose, and decide the thoughts that you want to produce the behaviors that will be created as a result of thinking differently. Because every behavior is nothing more than a product of a thought pattern. And if your behaviors are producing, if you're not producing the behaviors that you want, then you need to reflect on the thought patterns that you're thinking consistently that are producing those external behaviors, and then just go, well, okay, if I'm producing these behaviors based on these thought patterns, let's define, decide, create some very deliberate thought patterns that are required. Start forcing those thoughts into your head, and then over time, just start watching those behaviors, take place. And it's not something that happens overnight, or it can. But the more you think differently and then behave in line with those thoughts, the more it becomes autonomous behavior. And the reason most people don't automatically behave in the way that they want is because their autonomous behavior has been programmed to produce what they're doing. And it's all a product of thought. It's all a product of self-hypnosis. Our thoughts are nothing more than a self-hypnotic prophecy. Become conscious, become deliberate, choose the thoughts that you want and start acting in line with them, because the more those two align, the stronger it becomes, and then the more habitual and autonomous it becomes. And then success is like being on autopilot. It just happens.
Brady Lane on Instagram says, do I continue to rebuild a relationship with my brother and his wife just to please my parents, or should I stop to prevent continuous hurt and rejection?
Well, that's an intimate question. Look, I don't know the situation. I don't know the circumstance. I don't know the context. I don't know if there's mental abuse or physical abuse or emotional abuse involved. Now, that's really tough. At the end of the day, just my advice is do what makes you happy. But do it in an environment whereby there is health, there is harmony, and then there's a level of, look, to me, the most important things in my life is harmony. And if I've got family members that when I spend time with them, it creates disharmony, look, I mean no disrespect to the family that I spend little time with. I just don't spend time with them. And it doesn't mean that I ignore them from my life completely. It just means that I spend, in most cases, a lot less time with them because of the disharmony that's created. And one of I've got to the stage in my life where my happiness isn't dependent on what someone wants me to do. Like, for example, if I had a family member that wanted me to spend time with another family member in order for them to be happy, I'd be very consciously aware and be engaging in the conversations that I don't control their happiness. I am not responsible to spend time with someone that causes me mental, physical, or emotional pain to make someone happy. That's their deal. That's their jam. They need to focus on their game. They need to do them. You do you, boo. That's my favorite saying right now. You focus on you, because when we think about this, the life that we're in, why do most people, Maddie, why do you think most people do what they do? Like, why do you think most people chase money? Why do you think most people chase a relationship? Why do you think most people chase health?
Want to be happy.
Because they want to be happy. Find out what makes you happy. And if spending time with your brother and his wife doesn't make you happy, then don't do it. But think about the consequences of that in relation to the other family members, and make it an educated or a very deliberate decision. But at the same time, if the reason spending time with your brother and his wife makes you unhappy is because of your own stuff, because they're bringing up your own stuff, then maybe there's some work that you need to do. If they're not physically or mentally or emotionally abusive towards you, but just being around them triggers you, that is an indication for growth. That is an indication for work that needs to be done. So that doesn't mean necessarily that you should spend less time with them. That indicates perhaps you should be looking at what it is that they do that triggers you, that brings up your stuff. Because whether it be our family, whether it be our friends, whether it be our kids or our loved ones, those that trigger emotions within us are there by design to show us the work that needs to be done. And if there is work that needs to be done based on triggers that we experience, then do the fucking work, mate. Do the work. And that means if you need to go and sit and talk to someone, talk to someone. If you need to read some books, read some books. If you need therapy, do therapy. If you need to enter, some form of recovery because it's related to some form of, addiction on some level of the spectrum, then do whatever work is required. But please understand, if this person brings up stuff for you and you choose not to see them, there's going to be someone else that's going to bring that stuff up. It may not just be in the form of a brother. It may be in the form of a friend. It may be in the form of a relationship. But here's what I know. If you can get yourself to a place in life where no matter what anyone else does, you can be you without being triggered, you've won. You've won, which means you can spend time with certain family members, you can spend time with certain friends that push your buttons, but you just don't respond, you just don't react. And that to me is the greatest level of freedom. But if whatever you need in life will control you, and if you are controlled by the ability of others to push your buttons, then you'll be indiscriminately fucked with your entire life in situations where you will perceive it to be completely beyond your control. But if you want to get the control of your life back, start looking at what your buttons are, start exploring your triggers, and start doing the work around what that is, so that you can get to the point where people can sit there and press every single fucking button on the computer, but you just sit there and go, hey, it's cool, I understand people behave this way, that's okay. And that really comes back fundamentally to acceptance. Accepting your brother for who they are, accepting your mother for who they are, accepting your brother's wife for who they are, and not requiring them to be something different so that you can be happy. Just be happy being you. And the happier you can be being you, the less requirement you have to determine or to dictate to others how they need to behave around you in order for you to be happy. People are who they are. And we are who we are. We can't control the thoughts and the behaviors and the actions of others, but we can certainly control our own. So you do you work on you do your work, and if that involves being with them, be with them. If that involves not being with them, don't be with them. But ultimately, fundamentally, just focus on the things that make you happy. But don't do it in this obnoxious way where people go, well, this person pisses me off, so Kerwin's giving me permission not to speak to them ever again. Yeah, but if they're pissing you off for reasons that you need, or for reasons or situations or circumstances around triggers that you need to do work on, it ain't going to be about this person. Someone else is going to pop up to take their place. This is how the universe works. Do the work. You'll be fine. Good luck with that. Another good question.
That's episode 31.
That's episode 31 of the Hey Kerwin Show. We are in the dirty 30s. The question of the day. What is your number one trigger when it comes to dealing with your family? Identify what the trigger is. Be open, be honest, but then give yourself the opportunity to go, right, what work might be required? I'm just curious into what is the number one trigger that you have. You don't even have to relate it to a family member, but what is the thing that pisses you off the most? Because if you know exactly what that is, then that'll be a great indication of work that needs to be done for you to get to the other side so that you can't be controlled. And those that can't be controlled are empowered. Good luck with that one. Welcome to the Dirty 30s of the Hey Kerwin Show. Till next time, say hi to your mum for me.